Okay, this is the first ever live reading from Damnation, the Gothic Game, the novel. And we find Mara, a mysterious young gypsy woman, en route to a mysterious castle in the Carpathian Mountains. I hope you enjoy it. Mara felt the biting cold of the wind penetrating the shell of the carriage, despite the warmth of her fellow travellers' bodies around her. She could discern from the angle of the vehicle that they were travelling up a steep incline. Peering out of the window beside her, she immediately regretted her course of action upon seeing a vertiginous drop into deep black nothingness. She heard the crack of the driver's whip once again, and clenched her teeth as the carriage tipped alarmingly in the direction of the abyss. Tearing her eyes away from the window, she pushed her body back into the unyielding upholstery. Another crack of the whip, and the carriage sped on, its velocity marked by the frenetic clatter of the horses' hooves on the rocky ledge along which they travelled. After what felt like an age, the land began to level out, and the coach with it, provoking Mara to risk another look out of the window. She saw that they had progressed away from the narrow mountain ledge and onto a dirt track. Darkness closed in, carriage shrouded by dense forest either side. Night creatures stirred at the clatter of the coach and the scent of the horses, and Mara saw yellow eyes at the tree line reflected in the light of the moon. The low wail of wolves echoed across the treetops, and Mara glanced at Rasputin, remembering his eyes reflecting fire in the station waiting room. This time, she found he had his eyes shut, in meditation or sleep, she did not know. The driver urged his horses on, the whip cracking madly to make them gallop ever faster. Mara felt worry clutching at her breast. If the driver overran the horses, they might become injured or at least unable to maintain the pace for too long. The idea of becoming stranded out there in the wilderness was almost more than she could bear. She could feel the tension from her travelling companions too. An unspoken, almost primal silence had seized the interior of the carriage, punctuated only by the noisy remonstrations of the driver as he punished the horses with whip crack after whip crack. Mara saw dark shapes outside, keeping pace alongside the carriage, and she realized the urgency in a heartbeat. A pack of wild wolves was chasing them down, their sleek bodies threatening in the half-light of the moon as it flickered behind storm clouds. Their yelps and cries hinted at the feral savagery that drove them on. The horses thundered through the landscape, the carriage creaking and groaning like the timbers of some great sailing ship in a storm. The front wheel on Mara's side struck something hard, a rock perhaps, and she was nearly sent toppling from her seat as the carriage rocked with the impact. Gripping the window strap tight, she managed to stay in her seat. The Englishman began to make some glib comment about the quality of the roads in the Carpathians, when he too seemed to notice the wolf pack pursuing them. That shut him up, and Mara felt grateful for this small mercy. On! Ha! The driver shouted, the snap of his whip punctuating his cries. Mara heard the snarls of the wolf pack and saw through the window that they were gaining. Impossible that they could run so fast. Their fangs flashed white in the night, and Mara felt sick to her stomach. She imagined the gnawing hunger that must possess such beasts. "We have safety in numbers, child," her father used to say when she could not sleep for fear of the howls echoing around her childhood village. They numbered only 5 in the carriage, plus the driver, but he was vulnerable out in the open. If the wolves reached the horses... A strange glow appeared up ahead. Mara squinted through the mud-flecked glass of the carriage window and saw a huge ring of what looked like blue flame encircling the twisting dirt track as it emerged from the tree cover. The carriage thundered on, straight through this strange phenomenon, and Mara fancied that the carriage would catch a light from the weird flames. The opposite became fact, for no sooner had it passed through the strange blue barrier, the air inside the carriage seemed to cool discernibly. The effect was not dissimilar to that experience when entering a cave on a hot summer's day. Mara leaned forward so she might peer back at the flames, and she saw the shapes of the wolves behind them. They had given up their pursuit of the carriage at last, perhaps spooked by the weird phosphorescence of those dancing flames. "Did you see that?" she asked the Englishman, upon noticing that he too had been peering out of the window on his side. "Marsh gas," he said. "Smell must have put their noses out of joint. Bally lucky for us, actually, with those damnable hounds scenting us." Mara sighed, feeling relief seep into her bones. Then she saw the castle. High atop the rocks it loomed, indomitable, at the centre of the dark hoofprint of the Carpathian Mountains. A jagged row of treetops either side gave the impression of black teeth bared to the night sky. Feeling queasy at the height, Mara lowered her gaze. Again, the track became vertiginous as the carriage traversed a narrow causeway that snaked on toward the castle. The moon broke the clouds, and Mara saw its light reflected on the surface of a wide moat encircling the castle. As the carriage drew nearer to the outer wall of the structure, she noticed that the wall itself was hewn from the very rock upon which the castle crouched, hunkered down like a vast predatory animal. And now that preternatural creature of stone and mortar showed its jaws as, with the great clanking of unseen mechanisms, the enormous drawbridge began to descend over the moat. The driver urged his horses on, not for one moment slowing the pace as they hurtled toward the descending drawbridge. Mara held her breath, frightened for a moment that they might actually plunge into the black icy waters of the moat, but the drawbridge completed its descent with a mighty thud upon the ground. In a heartbeat the carriage was up and on to the heavy wooden bridge, the horses' hoof falls echoing off the sheer wall of the castle. The carriage thundered into a stone courtyard which was flanked by high watchtowers, each bearing a single flaming torch. The flames danced in the wind, casting wild shadows across the entrance of the castle. The doors were enormous, studded by great bolts of iron, and were weathered by centuries of Carpathian storms. The driver reined the horses in hard, and they whinnied to a sharp stop. Mara held tight onto the leather window strap until she felt the carriage come to a standstill. Only then did she let out a long, controlled breath. She glanced at the aristocratic woman who looked to be on the edge of her self-imposed decorum, dabbing at the perspiration on her brow with a laced handkerchief. The Englishman looked rather sweaty too, and he used his cravat to wipe his upper lip before rapping on the ceiling of the carriage and bellowing, "I say, old chap, let us out, will you? There's a good fellow." Awkward moments passed, without any indication that the driver intended to hop down from his seat in order to open the door for his passengers, as would usually be the custom anywhere but here. "I formally retract my last statement," the Englishman blustered. "Uncouth ruffian," the aristocrat muttered, each syllable dripping poison, and for a moment Mara could not tell if she was referring to the driver or the Englishman. Rasputin slapped his hands down onto his robed knees and then stood up. He pulled at the window strap, then reached out through the window and turned the door handle. When he opened it, cold mountain air rushed into the carriage, heavy with the scents of wet stone and evergreens. To Mara, it smelled almost like home. So why is it, she wondered, that I feel so afraid here?